take us through, let's just start in the locker room and just the temperature of the disappointment and the main thing that stood out, I guess, from the post game of obviously guys that are laid it all out there but came up short.
Well, I think there is definitely a level of sadness, and how could there not be? This was a magical season. Multiple players described it as a special season. Ben Johnson said it himself. It's been a special year, and I think we can all agree with that. With all the fourth quarter comebacks, all the steps forward that Caleb Williams took this year, all the heroicism. I feel like every week there was a new hero coming about for the Chicago Bears, whether it's special teams, offense, or defense. You just had playmakers showing up at the most crucial of times. But there was a level of sadness. Definitely. You hear it all the time. The NFL is that not for long league and things change. And there's a few players coming out of contract. And you had those feelings. You had those questions come up already. Like, do you want to be here next year? Do you see yourself as part of this team next year? That includes Jaquan Brisker. That includes Kevin Byard. This team's going to change. And multiple players brought that up at different times in different interviews in that locker room. So as exciting as this season was, that level of sadness because the changes on the horizon that started to settle in for a few players.
Johnsy, I guess we should start with just the way they still managed to come back in a game they lost. Like what's weird is they still had that moment. But I go back to the start of the game, and I brought this up at the start of the show. They had 7 possessions where they could have taken a lead in this game. 8 if you include, technically they could have gone for 2 on the last one, but kind of throwing that situation out because they did score. 7 possessions, and they only scored 1 field goal on all those possessions. I know you were on this a couple weeks ago where you were kind of defending the defense a little bit and saying more is needed from this offense. And it almost seemed like time ran out on the offense a little bit here tonight, whether it was the injuries up front, the attrition, the drops, that success rate that really hasn't been as high as you want it to be this season. What did you gather from the locker room that kind of reflected the missed opportunities on offense tonight?
All right. Well, let's start at the end since you brought up that first. I think everybody in this press box, everybody in this stadium, and probably everybody in that locker room thought the Bears were going to win after Cole Kmet, caught that touchdown pass. How it still got to him, it's unbelievable. That throw just floated in the air for such a long period of time. What Cole Kmet called it a pop-up, and he just had to field it like he was in the outfield, and the defensive back lost that. I think everybody in this stadium thought the Chicago Bears were going to win the football game after they tied it up. Going into overtime, they get the quick stop by the defense. They had the momentum. You believed that they were going to win. And I think the Bears had that belief as well. As you start to analyze this game, yes, I think this game is full of missed opportunities, whether it's drops and whether it's passing up on points early in the game. But I think a lot of these things are what we discussed maybe throughout the year. Ben Johnson's decision-making, the guts he shows to go for it more on fourth down than I think Chicago is used to. That's Ben Johnson. That's what he does. That's how he likes to play. And I think everybody in Chicago might have to get used to it. Maybe that changes next year, but I'm not sure, Adam. You and I have talked about that. This is just part of who he is, and we have to get kind of used to the way he bets on himself and bets on his team on fourth down. The drops, I want to say the weather was a factor. I really do. It was cold. Probably throwing a heavy ball out there. Maybe it felt like a rock for some of these players. But at the same time, guys, we know drops have been a storyline all season. That starts with Rome Odunze's drop right at the goal line there. That has to be a catch that is made, especially at this point in the season with everything on the table. The short yardage situation, I feel like the run game problems are like a new issue that's shown up over the past few weeks. But you saw it today when the Bears needed 1 or 2 yards, they just couldn't deliver. Ben Johnson bemoaned his short yardage package, his 5 and short game plan. It didn't work against the Rams today, but yeah, there's a lot to get to through this game, and I know we'll get to it this week.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. I don't think Ben Johnson's aggressiveness is going anywhere anytime soon. That's just his identity as a play caller. That being said, we're going to have plenty of offseason to talk about some big decisions here from a roster standpoint, but one of those decisions in particular, Jaquan Brisker, and the safety position. Jaquan had a hell of a night tonight. Did you have a chance to talk to him, or, what was your perspective on a big night from Jaquan?
Braggs, I thought this was Jaquan Brisker's best game that I think I've covered in the Chicago Bears tenure. He was flying all over the field. He was solid in coverage. He was combative in coverage. He was making plays on the ball. He was filling alleys. He was physical where you needed him to be. I thought this was one of his best games that I think I've covered. Maybe his best game as a Chicago Bear in the divisional round of the playoffs. So just an outstanding way to deliver in the most crucial of moments. But, you talk to, like, the sense when you talk to Jaquan Brisker is like, maybe this was it. I think my most lasting vision from the locker room today is that locker room was near empty. And there's still one player in that locker room still sitting in his locker, still in his jersey, his blue pants and his blue jersey. And it was Jaquan Brisker. He was still getting untaped. He did multiple interviews, but that locker room cleared out fast. But Jaquan Brisker, maybe sensing that this was it, maybe his last time in this locker room, was still in his jersey, still in his pants, still sitting in his locker room stall, kind of soaking it in as players left, to go meet their families. I would safely say he was the last player in that locker room.
And we have a little bit of footage here from Jaquan Brisker and some of the footage you caught of him in the locker room. Here it is now.
I mean, it was just win or go home. We're at home. I don't want to lose. I want to win. I want to give all my teammates my energy, my passion, whatever I can give them on the field. You just never know when it's your last play, so just try to give it up my all.
Well, how do you explain like the
ball goes through the upright? How do you feel? You see their sideline.
I honestly couldn't believe it. I thought he was gonna miss it, especially being cold, especially windy, snowy. He missed one in Seattle. I don't know if we had any timeouts or anything. I thought we was gonna try to ice him, but or get a block. Either or, I thought he was gonna miss it, but when it went through, that was our season right there. That's gonna be the last time a lot of these players are gonna be in the same locker room together and things like that. That's what I really thought, and could be my last. You never know. So I just took a knee down there and just sat there. That was crazy.
You guys got a lot of stops on the win.
So he's living in reality right there. Could be my last, and Byard's a free agent too. What type of market is he going to have? Are the Bears? The Bears have a lot of needs. Do they have the money available to pay him? Kevin's been a phenomenal leader in the locker room, led the league in interceptions. What? This is an off-season question, Johnsy, but what do you think happens with the safeties?
But you can see the offseason kind of settling in with Jaquan Brisker. You can see it that it's on his mind. Like, he brought that up unsolicited, and he was later asked about his future. It's probably in another segment there, but I think you can sense the finality that this could be it for Jaquan Brisker as a Chicago Bear. And I think this speaks to the message that a lot of players, whether it's Cole Kmet, Kevin Byard, or Jalen Johnson, that this team is going to change. And they thought they had a special bond. They thought they had a special thing going. But that's all going to change next year. Kevin Byard, just like a Jaquan Brisker, said that he wanted to be here next year, but they understand the business side of the NFL. Both of them would be surprising if both of them return. Deshaun Wright's a free agent. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's a free agent. So that secondary, which I would argue was a strength for a good stretch of this season for the Chicago Bears, is on the verge of major changes. And you don't like hearing players talk about that, but you could get a sense when you talk to them enough that it kind of settles in, the reality of the changes ahead, because the NFL, it moves quickly, fellas. We know that.
Jahns, what was your view of the overtime interception, and what did you learn after the game about what did happen or didn't happen?
Have you guys played Caleb yet?
No, we have not.
So it was a miscommunication. That's how he described it, between him and DJ Moore. DJ Moore continued to go high, and he expected DJ to flatten that route, kind of towards the sideline to where he threw it. We saw Luther Burden coming up the sideline there as well. DJ Moore, I didn't speak to him. I didn't see him in the locker room after the game much. I'm not sure if others did either, but obviously something was wrong on that play. Ben Johnson said himself he has to go back and watch it, but to hear Caleb explain it, DJ continued his route high. He threw it, hoping or anticipating that DJ would flatten his route, but that didn't happen.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Jahns, but watching the play in live action or watching the replay, whether he could have flattened his route or went high with it, I think a lot of the discrepancy from fans is it didn't feel like he really ran the route or finished the route. What was your perspective on DJ's effort on that play?
See, that's an example where I think I have to go watch it again. And I want to hear from DJ Moore himself explain what he's supposed to do on it. And I want to hear Ben Johnson explain like what the progressions are supposed to be on something like that. I think context is needed before we start throwing certain players under the bus for effort or for certain miscommunications. Obviously, one happened there, but I think it's best that we hear DJ Moore's side of things on it. To me, just in general, like I don't want to say it felt forced, but I like looking at it. I don't think Kyle Monangai was open as a check down. Maybe it's just a bad play where you have to throw the ball away, but you felt like the Bears had some momentum there. You felt like they could win. The belief was in this building, and that sucked the entire energy out of this of Soldier Field tonight.
Jahns, let's talk about the defense side of the ball. Dennis Allen and his adjustments after that first drive. Kind of talk about what he did, with that defense, especially holding Matthew Stafford and company in regulation to 17 points, 20 points total in that game, under 400 yards, probably one of his worst performances of the season. Talk about that, the defense. And
I thought he had a great day. Yeah, I thought DA had a great day. Braggs, he did what you hoped he would do. He had C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Kyler Gordon on the field at the same time, and he went after Matthew Stafford with that look. We saw Kyler Gordon he blitzed and he got a sack out of it. And I think it just gave him an advantage, just the level of surprise, like who's coming, who's going. I like the aggressive attack. I think he used the weather to his advantage as well. At one point, I thought the snow and the conditions were really bad for both offenses. But you would think that the way this defense was playing, that the offense would deliver more points. I felt like the defense stood its ground more often than not. I thought the secondary had a good day. I thought really the entire unit had a good day, and it starts with Dennis Allen. But I like the creativity. I like using those two nickelbacks on the field at the same time because I think it confused Sean McVay, one of the best play callers in the game, because that's something the Bears have never done all season, is use those two players on the field because they never had an opportunity to do that until the past couple weeks.
Do you think Ben had a good day today? How much do you put on Ben? We're having this Woots leaning into some Ben issues here.
Yeah. Carm, they scored 17 points, right? 17 points is the final for them. So what do you think the answer is? I mean, he'll tell you himself, absolutely not. It wasn't enough. He praised his defense after the game, and his offense, which has delivered explosive play after explosive play and has put up points. What were they averaging? Almost 30 points per game. Did not produce at home in the playoffs. So I think Ben Johnson himself would tell you that he wasn't good enough tonight against the Los Angeles Rams.
No, Jahns, there's a famous story that Peter King has told many times about the Oilers-Bills game back in the 90s when the Bills came all the way back, where members of the Houston Oilers were booking their flights to the next round of the playoffs before blowing the lead. Sources here at CHGO tell me that you had already booked a flight to Seattle.
I did.
Would you like to take responsibility for what happened tonight?
I don't believe in that type of karma. I believe in good planning. That's how you have to be aggressive.
You can always get a refund or credit, right? Tell them.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, it is one of those things, Jahns, and I'm a very superstitious fan, no question about that. But it does become a thing with teams you believe in that the superstitions kind of start to go out the window. And for me as a Cubs fan in 2015, you're wearing the same outfit, you're hanging out with the same people, you don't want to move a muscle as they beat the Cardinals in the playoffs and try to find their way to a World Series. Maybe they're a year too early. But then that next season, that team did not blink. They lost Schwarber in the first 3 games of that season, and yet they continued to just steamroll through the year. Again, it's baseball, totally different thing. But I just know from a fan standpoint, that fan base who had been just hit so many times with so many heartbreaking seasons and so many outlier seasons, that year they stacked off of 2015 and then came into 2016 with a sense of we're going to finish the job And when they got back to the playoffs that year, that was one of the first times in my life since the Jordan days that fans were walking into Wrigley Field without superstitions and no worry and an understanding this team's going to do it. And so I just hope that that's what this team can become, is to stack what they've done this year and stop hoping for miracles, stop worrying about superstitions, and push all that. Book your trip to the Super Bowl next year, because that's what this team is capable of. But it's a mindset thing at the end of the day.
Well, the expectations have changed. Jalen Johnson, I asked him, like, what has Ben Johnson built in year one here? And his answer was short and succinct: a winning football culture. And I think that's what the Chicago Bears have here. Good, better, best. We can have fun with all of that. It's on T-shirts and whatnot. But the expectation, Braggs, you're right, will be different for next year. You're going to expect playoffs. You're going to expect a longer postseason run. You're going to expect improvement from the offense, particularly Caleb Williams. You're going to expect, Ben Johnson to learn from his mistakes, especially in a game like this, because this is his second game as a head coach in the playoffs. That's a lot on his plate as a first-time head coach. So I think there's a lot of good things that you could take from this season. And that vibe was in the locker room. I did mention the sadness, but I do believe that the players, especially the ones that that are coming back, whether it's Jalen Johnson or Cole Kmet or Darnell Wright, they believe that something has been built here, something they can build upon in the following season, starting next year. And to make your point about the Chicago sports, we've seen it before. You mentioned the Cubs, the Blackhawks, in 2009 going to 2010. They had the same vibe going, where they had a long postseason run. It was heartbreaking. But the next year, expectations were higher. They believed in themselves. They believed that they were going to make a postseason run and something better. And it happened in 2010. So maybe we're looking ahead too much here, after this game. But I'm sure some of that narrative, some of that vibe will exist in the summer, especially going in the training camp.
Hey, for us old hats around here, there was 84. They beat Washington. Todd Bell smoked the living daylights out of Joe Washington. Then they went to San Francisco, got their brains beaten in. Of course, McMahon was hurt, and that set up Super Bowl 85. This was different, though. The Bears, you didn't leave that game thinking they should have won. Today you do, but regardless, I do think that team is going to have a lot of there's no reason that they won't have a lot of confidence going into next season.